Go to school and you'll learn to read. Learn to read and you'll be able to get a better job. Get a better job, you'll earn more money. Going to school is really important. This is the advertised bill of goods that we were sold as children when we were talking about education. When you rocked up and said, "Mum, I don't want to go to school," this is something along the lines of exactly what she said. And it's really important that we learn to read, to get a better job, so that we can earn more money, so we can live more comfortably. Actually, sociology says that one of our main drives is to live as comfortably as it is possible to live, not just to survive, but to thrive. And so when people appeal to that desire, that need, they are appealing to our very heart. But is it true? I'm Captain Sociology, and we're having a deep dive on education from a sociological perspective. Well, the reality is that going to school and getting a good education does make a difference to your lifetime earnings. In Australia, there is about $1 million difference in the earnings between a school completer and a university graduate. And so you can imagine that as we go to the ends of those two spectrums, those who drop out of school early and those who continue on to higher education, that the gap becomes different. There is, of course, a bit of a difference between male and female earnings, accounted for by maternity leave and parental care, but that is a little bit balanced out by the fact that in Australia we have our forced retirement savings, which we call superannuation. And of course, the more you work, the bigger your superannuation is at the end, regardless of if you're male or female. So being able to continue through education to the natural end, whether it's a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and less so, but a PhD may be helpful in this as well, means that yes, your education did pay off. Going to school did make you more money and you are happier and healthier, more comfortable for it. But is it true for everyone? Well, data says that in Australia, around about 1/3 of all students can't read effectively at an adult level when they finish school. And so we're going to think that about 1/3 of people actually lack the ability to achieve in that kind of way. Are they being failed by the education system? Or is it the reality that we've inflated the value of education significantly? Probably both is true. If you think historically, and now I'm thinking about ancient education in ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, China, education was reserved for people who were of noble status. And that's for a very particular and perhaps obvious reason: it cost money. Also, people who were of noble birth didn't have to toil the fields for all of the daylight hours in order just to be able to survive. And so they could indulge, I suppose, in work that gave them in education rather, that gave them better work. It has been a cycle right from the start that those who come from privileged positions do better at education, are able to access better education, and consequently able to get better outcomes in their working lives and therefore in their personal lives. Does that mean we shouldn't educate people who aren't from wealthier backgrounds? Well, no, but I think we have to acknowledge that this bill of goods that education was advertised to provide to us may be a little bit false. Now, we also can't have this discussion without also talking about qualification creep or credential creep or qualification inflation, a couple of different names for the same thing. But what that means is that over time, the kind of qualification you need to do a particular job has changed significantly. And of course, the change is always in the upward direction. Nobody is ever deciding that you need less qualifications. I just don't think it's ever going to happen. Credential creep looks like this. In 1950, if you had finished high school, you could go and teach high school. So I mean, year 12, and it was an expectation that you'd done okay. You weren't the class second to last. You'd done okay. And you went back and taught straight away. In fact, historically, that was how teachers were. You were a master of a subject area and you went and you taught it. Now, of course, teaching is a skill, and some people who are masters of a particular area of content aren't necessarily masters of communication and getting the best out of students, but that's not the point. if you'd mastered a content area, you could turn around and teach it. In fact, teachers used to be called masters, and the principal of a school was the head master, the most mastered, the teacher who'd achieved the greatest mastery. It could be of the content area, or it could be of communication or behaviour management. But that's how it was. In the 70s, if you wanted to teach high school, you'd go and get a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. Now you're a teacher. So again, you'd mastered the content a little bit. You had a credential to prove your mastery, and you could be in classrooms. Now, in the state that I'm in, you could teach up until the early 2000s with just that. Now, there was quite a significant period of crossover where people who were entering the teaching profession had to already demonstrate mastery of teaching as well, by getting a grad cert or a diploma of teaching. But there was a significant period of time where people who'd become credentialed in the late 70s and early 80s were still teaching, but had never become credentialed as teachers. That time has ended. Now, if you want to be a high school teacher, a capable one, you need to have your Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Mathematics. Then you go and do a postgraduate qualification, a credential in teaching. In most states now, it's a 2-year master's degree. And the good thing is that does get recognised in the pay scale. 5-year trained teacher gets paid as a 5-year trained teacher. But you can see the significant creep that's happened. In 70 years, 80 years, we've gone from a situation where you could turn around, because you'd mastered the content, you could turn around and be sharing that on, right up into now, where it's actually, in fact, not really enough to do that anymore. At the highest end of compulsory education, there are people gaining PhDs in the content area. And good for them. Like, that's an interesting and useful way to extend your knowledge and understanding, to be able to share it on to students. It is mastery. But look at the change. Something that was once upon a time just a capacity issue, even in the teaching crisis as it stands at the moment, still must be multiply credentialed to teach in a high school, or 4-year degree to teach in primary school. You might say it makes sense in education that teachers should have to do that. Okay. Nursing aides, enrolled nurses. Once upon a time, to become even a full-blown registered nurse, you'd live in a nurse's house with other trainee nurses, and you'd work shifts with a matron supervising you, and you would learn how to nurse that way. The advantage of that was you learnt a lot about patient care, comfort care we might call it. Now, the bare minimum to be a nurse, a registered nurse, is a 3-year degree. I mean, I'm not saying it's terrible, but we've gone from being a 15-year-old, finishing school, doing maybe some time working as a doctor's receptionist and assisting the nurse, and then going into nurses training in the nursing house. We've moved on from that to being, you finish school at 18 and then you go do a Bachelor of Nursing, and it has moved nursing into a much more scientific kind of career, which is probably good. It's not a judgment, it's just that's the credential creep. And so instead of being 15 when you start on the pathway, you're now going to be something more like 22 when you start actually practicing nursing. This credential creep puts all professions out of some students' reach right from the start, because being able to spend the time to acquire a 3, 4 or 5-year credential for what are kind of basic jobs in the credentialed world is not achievable. But being a nurse's aide and getting paid something for your time would have been very achievable. So in a sense, I think that education in the sense of credential creep is actually creating a greater split between classes in society, which is something I think conflict theorists foresaw. But I'm not sure that it's helping with things like the reading deficit, things like that. That is education, the questions of the bill of advertised goods. When we speak next, we will be talking about how education might be made better, what is missing in education from a sociological perspective, and how that might be achieved. So we'll have a look at a couple of examples from around the world, which would be awesome, and the things that make those challenging to apply from a sociological perspective in other countries. I've been Captain Sociology. See ya.